Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar focused on the Dizzion Control Center. This is Kayla Kirkby. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Dizzion, and I'm really pleased to welcome everybody to today's call. We're so excited to be able to take you through the Control Center, which is our customer portal. But specifically, we're going to be diving into some new functionality that we've added that we call Dizzion Insights. And our speakers, Brady Ranum and Rob Green, are really thrilled to be here with us and dive into that in just a few moments. But first, what we're going to do is give you just a few of the agenda items and a couple simple reminders. Everyone is on mute. All participants are muted today, so if you do have any questions or concerns, please use the participant console on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be collecting questions, and we're open to answering all of those questions at the end of today's session after our speakers go through the formal slides. So please use that chat functionality. We'll be gathering the questions up and then having Rob and Brady address those towards the end of today's session. So let's dive into how and why we feel Dizzion Insights and what we're providing in the Control Center is really changing the game and bringing a whole new level of visibility and transparency into VDI environments. So Rob and Brady will start out by talking a little bit about really the crux of the issue here, and that is driving productivity for end users. That's really at the heart of what we're trying to do, why that's been a difficulty or a bit of a black box up until now, what we're doing specifically to fill some of those gaps, and what's on the horizon there. So again, just a reminder, you're muted, and please submit your questions at any time through the chat function. We'll gather those up and address them at the end of today's formal slides. Our speakers today are Rob Green, Chief Technology Officer for Dizzion. Rob, welcome to today's webinar. Really glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And Brady Ranum, the Head of Product and Strategy here at Dizzion. Brady, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kayla.
I'm going to pass it off to you. I think you're going to kick things off and dive right in for us.
Excellent, thank you. And I think one of the things that happen, and especially when we're talking to new potential customers or when we're talking to companies that are curious about our technology, usually we're talking to the IT group, and the IT group is usually the one spearheading that initiative or spearheading the investigation into whether it's VDI or a new VDI technology. And really it affects the entire company. It's not just about IT. IT plays a huge role inside of it, but it's really about productivity. And that productivity has to range throughout the company, and it's got to go from the end users having a great experience and having the applications that they need to get their jobs done. But on the other side, it's got to give visibility back to the executive management, but also all the way in between. So it's not just the help desk, but it also is the engineering teams, it's the business unit managers, it's all the way up to the executives. And when you have those analytics, you can make really good decisions. But without those analytics, it's tough to make those good decisions. And it's been hard to do in the past. And there is so much information that you can gather from the end users and how they're using those applications and how they're using the systems. And I think the best thing to do is just kind of start diving in and where do we affect those each individuals and how do we affect them and how do we make their lives better, quite honestly. And I think of the next slide that we've got coming up, I call this one the man slide because it's got a little bit of everything, of something, excuse me, for everybody in there. And Rob, would you mind running through this one and kind of hitting on each point of where we affect each individual or each department within a company?
Absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, VDI is just not an IT project. It's really it's a business project, and you know, when you look at VDI or DAS or cloud desktops, it really has different meanings to different people in the organization. And traditionally, most DAS providers kind of focus on the left-hand side of this persona, this man slide, if you will. And it's been focused on creating new tools for the engineering and the help desk and providing a desktop to the end user. But really, it's a little bit deeper than that. From an end user perspective, we're really focused on how do we increase their productivity? How do we increase the productive hours you know, the workforce today is moving. It's not in the same, it's not always in one place. You have a mobile workforce, and you've got to provide a solution that allows them to be productive from anywhere at any time. And it's really the precipice of and the crux of really what VDI and the value that VDI brings to them. And the help desk is all about, you know, saving time. And how do we provide a single interface for that help desk user to support their end users effectively, find solutions fast, and really empower those help desk administrators to solve those problems very, very quickly. You know, no one wants to call up the help desk for a problem, and nor do they want to wait hours and hours for a solution. And really, it's what our focus is to help them find that solution as quickly as possible. And then from an engineering perspective, you know, I don't think anyone wants to be, you know, kind of brought into a VDI problem because the desktop is slow. So the drive there is fewer escalations. We want to allow those engineers to focus on really valuable projects and not necessarily being drug into the stack, if you will, of, you know, to troubleshoot a VDI problem. And then, you know, and then another kind of differentiator for us is we're looking at, well, how does VDI impact the executive? How does it impact the business manager? And really, you have to understand what they're trying to do. What's their goal in using this technology? And the business manager really wants to enable their teams. They want an end user productivity that's flexible. They want to increase that productivity, and they want to be able to get some internal data around what applications are people using. You know, are they effective? Are they able to do their jobs, you know, quickly and consistently? That's really what that line of business manager wants to understand and glean from the system. Not only, you know, delivering a desktop, but how are people using it? And then on the executive side of the house, you know, it's really productivity equals revenue. Their investment in VDI is not small. You've got to invest a lot of time, energy, and money to transition into a use of VDI, and then especially looking at that from a cloud perspective, it's a huge transformation and requires investment. Well, understanding, well, what does that buy them, right? Being able to track that ROI, being able to right size and produce cost efficiencies, being able to focus on the business driving initiatives versus, you know, worrying about uptime and things of that nature. So really, you know, our goal in developing control center insights is really about appealing to all aspects of the business, not just the technical side of the house, but also that business side and being able to empower data-driven decisions, and that's key.
Yeah, great stuff, Rob. And the crazy part is that there's been a missing piece, right? There's all sorts of data that's happening at the endpoints and going through the desktops that the end users are using. And it's been hard to collect that data in the past. For one reason or the other, whether it's because you either don't have a unified system or because the tools are expensive and it takes another project and more capital after you've already put in a ton of capital into a VDI deployment or a DAS deployment. You don't want to continuously have to throw capital at things to get the insights out of it, to really make those good business decisions, whether it's reporting on utilization, whether it's understanding how your end users are using their applications and using the desktops. You've got to be able to pinpoint any of the weaknesses and the issues. And until recently, the only way of really doing that is interviewing employees and getting anecdotal feedback from folks and not really having the data to make real business driving decisions. And really what some of the coolest parts that we've seen from our customers using insights today is they can actually go through and say, hey, you know what, I've got these applications, or I've got these performance pieces, or I've got workers who are more productive than other workers, and how do I drill down into those things, and how do I figure out why they're more productive or what tools they're using, et cetera. And before it was just interviews. You'd have to sit for hours with an employee and figure out what makes them different from the other employee, or what makes a good employee or a highly productive employee better than even a mediocre employee, and where are they spending their time. And that data has been kind of obfuscated from everybody. It's been hard to get. You've got to drill so far down into the solutions and pull in all sorts of engineering resources in order to get that data. And it's really exciting that we've brought that right up to the surface and right into the portal with Control Center and Dizzion Insights. Moving on to the next slide, I think it really breaks down into 3 buckets. You know, you look at the monitoring, and that's really your day-to-day pieces, and how do I move forward day-to-day productivity, and the management of those things, and saying, geez, am I getting what I'm paying for, quite honestly, and how is my relationship with my DAS provider, or even my deployment of VDI? I need to be able to see, is it effectively meeting the business needs? And then on top of that, I need to be able to return something back to the business from an insight perspective to allow them to make good decisions, whether that's around employees, whether that's around applications the employees are using, or licensing that they may be wasting or not needing. But it's the whole gamut, right? I've got to be able to give a great end user performance. I've got to be able to manage that properly, and then I've got to be able to report on it and make decisions that can actually move the business forward. And that's really what we've done with Insights. And I think probably the best thing to do now, Rob, is just kind of dive in and show folks some of the information. Obviously, in a webinar, we can't go through the tool is unbelievably informative. It has so much information to give, and it's really quick to access, which is one of the things I love about it. Within 3 clicks, you can always get to the information you're looking for. But Rob, why don't we start a kind of high level at the KPIs, and let's get deeper and deeper as we go.
Absolutely, and I think one point we need to make is, you know, Control Center is our support portal, and the idea and the design around Control Center is to bring together all of the tools that are needed to manage the environment. So, Control Center provides you access to tickets, capacity planning, your day-to-day maintenance, windows, and things of that nature. Also provides you HTML access to your virtual desktop environment, as well as the administrative console, so you can manage all your users. So what we're adding to that, to Control Center, is this now Insights component that actually gives you a drill down, effective monitoring and data around how your users are functioning within that platform. And it starts with, what you're seeing here on the screen is really the KPIs. How do I take a 1,000-foot view of the entire environment? So here on this start screen, you've got the connections, right? How do my connections usually operate? So it gives you a pullback view of, the pattern in which your users are using and connecting into the desktop environment at Dizzion. And then it also provides you a network analysis. So how does the number of users on my platform kind of impact my network throughput? Then below that, we have a listing of all active users who are actively connected into the environment by desktop pool. So we can drill down and understand how people are connecting, what protocols they're using, how long they've been connected, and if they have a problem. So once you see this kind of key KPI, these users will change color based off of their performance. So if they're no color, then everything is working just fine. And if there is a yellow or orange or red color, you know that there's a problem, and we can drill down into the environment and see what's going on. And the idea here is, if you've ever managed a virtual desktop environment, it's like looking, for problems is like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. So how do you understand where that problem is, and how do you isolate it so that you're not escalating to the storage engineer, the network engineer, the hypervisor engineer, and you're able to handle these problems as much as you possibly can at that first call with the help desk. So looking at this this drill down, right? So I went to my KPI dashboard. I saw a problem with the user. All right. And then I'm going to click on that user's name, and then it pulls up another dashboard that says, okay, here are the KPIs for that user experience, right? The CPU memory. If there's any alerts, those will show up as well as where does that virtual desktop live in the overall environment. So here you can see we've got an issue. So this user in particular has a high CPU load. So the next question is, why? Why are they having that high CPU load? And then in the graph right below it, you can see this user is using a lot of Internet Explorer. And it's funny, whenever a user calls in and says, hey, my desktop is running slow, the first question is, okay, we need to figure out why it's running slow. And being able to get this insight within 2 clicks is very impactful, because you can actually now drill down into, all right, we know it's an Internet Explorer problem. what are you doing within a desktop? And it's funny. Many users, they've got access to the virtual desktop, and they may be running ESPN, watching the highlights from last night's game. You're watching MSNBC from a news perspective. And it's probably not the most ideal way to use your virtual desktop if you're supposed to be working. So being able to ascertain that information and understand how that user is using that desktop is vital, right? Sometimes they're not using it the way that it was designed to be used. Right? There's finite resources there.
And that's great information, Rob. And the funny thing is we find out all the time, or we help our customers find out all the time what their end users are doing. There's one customer of ours in particular that was running high CPU bandwidth, or excuse me, high CPU utilization on several of their desktops. And what they found out really quickly was that someone had chatted around to those 3 users. They had their chat going, and they chatted around the link to Hulu 123, which, for those of you that don't know, is a movie site. And so these end users were actually watching movies at work, and they were complaining about the performance of their desktops. Some were complaining, some weren't complaining, but even those that were and weren't, they could very quickly drill down and see what those end users were doing and what was taking up the CPU utilization of the machine. And it wasn't because there wasn't enough resources there. It was just, quite honestly, because the end users were doing something with the machines they really shouldn't be doing when they're trying to be productive during work hours. Good stuff. And how much, I mean, we can even drill down further. That's a great part too, is if you want to drill down further, and I think the next slide really covers this well, Rob, if you want to expand a little bit more here.
Yeah, so for the geeks on the call, this is really where you've pulled back a ton of metrics about that virtual desktop. And really understanding that sometimes the symptom that is portrayed to the end user may not be the underlying root cause of the problem. So going down one layer further and saying, okay, let's make sure we can exonerate all of the other components within that delivers that virtual desktop from being a culprit in this high CPU and slowness of the desktop. So really what this gives us is the ability to look at all of these metrics within that virtual desktop, whether it's the blast session, page files, CPU utilization, looking into the disk I/O. One of the interesting components that you learn over time is that when you have high disk I/O and latency on your disk, that actually sometimes will manifest itself as a high CPU problem. So you want to exonerate all those other things because you want to actually get down to the root cause. And really, these deep VDI analytics helps you to understand, am I having a problem somewhere else that may be contributing to this high CPU, or is it truly a user interaction problem? And that's really what this VDI, deep VDI analytics allows you to do is drill down and isolate the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first couple of slides what we've shown is there's a really high-level view that you can get a really quick look into the environment and all the users all at once and all the pieces and parts that make up the solution and the service all in one view. We dive down into help desk and where we help the help desk, and then even engineering if they want to do a deep dive, or the help desk wants to do a deep dive into that actual end user and what's going on in their desktop. Now we're kind of moving into a little bit more of a business manager and an executive type view. So really by business unit, this is breaking down where my users are, when are they logging on, how many of them do I have on at any point in time, how many are in the system. And the great part about this is I can look at this by business unit. It's not just a single view. I can see what business units are having, what kind of trends they're doing. Did they look like they did yesterday? Is it the same type of performance that I'm looking for, and do I have the same number of users to cover those shifts? And I can look at slower days or lunch times or those types of things and really figure out where my capacity is and where my end users are on net or on work hours or where they're not. So I think if we go to the next slide, one of the favorite things that I love about the tool is the fact that from a business manager, a lot of our customers have seasonal spikes. So they're not just that same 250 or 500 employees year round, whether it's retail and they have big seasonal spikes during the holiday seasons, whether it's Valentine's Day. A lot of our healthcare customers spike up during the open enrollment time frame. We've got some educational customers that they, before the school starts, they spike up. We've got taxation type customers, and during tax season, even the extended tax season, they spike up. So what this allows you to do is you can not only use a little slide bar there to go backwards or forwards. I guess you can't go forwards in time, but it'll allow you to go backwards and kind of see what it was last week or last month, et cetera. But also on the right-hand side, next to that kind of orange highlighted square block there, you can pick dates and times from the past. So you can say, hey, last year we did this much. We had these many employees on, but we're expecting growth of 20% this year. So what does 20% compared to last year look like? And how do we cover that? And how do we make sure that we don't either understaff or overstaff for this year's season compared to last year's season, or maybe the spring season versus the winter season, et cetera. So this is some great information from a business user's standpoint. And if we go into the next one, that next one is fantastic. And this one, so we deal also with a lot of companies that use contractors. And this isn't just a contractor slide, so to speak, but it's really about your whole user base. But we've had customers that have seen some incredible financial benefits out of using this against contractors. So we've got one of our customers has 500 offshore contractors, and they were able to run the tool and look into Dizzion Insights and say, holy smokes, I've got 500 contractors, but I've got so many of them that log in and actually do nothing, absolutely nothing. And if you look at the top part, we've got one of those users there that I think he logged in, checked his email, and then went on vacation. But they're billing against that company. So we gave them great data to be able to go back to their contractor and say, look, I'm paying for 500 people, but you've got 100 of them that are working less than 2 hours a day. And so they were able to renegotiate their contract. And funny enough, after they brought this up, the idle time of all these contractors went way down. So not only were they able to renegotiate their contracts and have less contractors, but those contractors that they did have were actually producing a whole lot more for them. So great stuff there as well. The other thing too is identifying which of those users are really active, right? And which of the users may need more resources, or maybe they're using the wrong applications, and because of that, the resources aren't appropriate, or they need to be shown something different. Rob, can you dive down a little bit deeper into this one to kind of tell us what we're seeing here?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really, getting a top 10 users by the amount of memory that they're consuming. And that could lead into a couple of different data-driven decisions, right? Number one, are the desktops sized properly for those use cases? Are they actually getting the effective horsepower in order to run their applications and do their job? Or, are they, do they have high productivity because of that? You can start to correlate this data and say, okay, my top 10 users versus my idle time, how is that kind of working out? Do I see the same users in both worlds? Because that allows you to now model how your users are consuming the resource and how effective they are in their work product. So this allows you to bring these again, data-driven decisions to say, okay, I want to incentivize more of this type of activity on the environment, or I need to reallocate some resources. Maybe you can see from this that they're hitting some limit, and that limit is because they've got 15 Chrome tabs open, and they're trying to get 15 things done at the same time, and they're pushing the envelope in these desktops, which drives their idle time way down and their productivity way up. But maybe if you give them a little bit more resources, they can do a little bit more. So again, those data-driven decisions based off of utilization and correlation really allows you to customize this virtual desktop environment to drive efficiency and drive the most out of what you can do with your employees and how you kind of serve your customers and get your jobs done. And I think tying that back in, one of the big questions I get from my CFO is, where can we tighten, the belt a little bit? Where can we shave some cost off? And I'd say the biggest, cost of most IT environments are two things: hardware and software licenses. So understanding, the number of users that are in the environment Are they actually using as much of the capacity that we have? Can we start to, kind of increase the density there and without impacting the user experience? That's one area that we can tweak based off of these reports, right? So maybe I don't need to have 200 physical servers. Maybe I only need 150 physical servers in order to meet the needs and demands of my users. Conversely, how many applications are they running, right? Are they using the application licenses that I've prepaid for? So if you think about Adobe and some of those specialized applications where you prepay for those licenses, but you only see you bought 500, but you only see a max of 50, right? So there's a different way we can approach that problem. You don't need to buy those 500 licenses. You can buy a subset far less than that and save a lot of money. And really, this data allows those business executives to make those key decisions based off of not anecdotal data, but actual real-life utilization and trends over a period of time. And that's critical when you're trying to tighten the belt, because you don't want to tighten it too much where you can't breathe. And that's very important when you're making any type of decision. You want that to be data-driven and trend-driven, and not anecdotal interviews or gut feelings, because those gut feelings can oftentimes have the opposite effect and make you less efficient.
Absolutely, Rob. And I wish on a webinar we could actually drill down and move around and all the other kind of stuff, because the next drill down from this screen here is absolutely fantastic, because it shows you not just what is the most used applications, but what applications aren't being used at all, right? So maybe we've loaded applications for the users to use and their licensing fees associated with them, but quite honestly, you're never using those applications. And it is a continual task for a company, an enterprise, to go back through and analyze all their applications and who's using them. And it's really difficult for that process, and you're really interviewing each one of your employees versus just going right to our portal and being able to drill down in a couple of clicks to see exactly what applications people are using, not just today, but yesterday. Maybe there's some applications that they're only using once a quarter, where if you only took a really quick view of it, you'd say, geez, you know what? Nobody uses this application, but maybe it's only used once a quarter, and it's a really important application that you shouldn't get rid of. But right-sizing those applications also gives you the opportunity to be more cost efficient and put those funds somewhere else that actually helps grow the business versus piling up bad dollars after good. So absolutely fantastic information, and I think it's information that people haven't been able to do before. There are certain tools and huge enterprise software tools that you can go out there and buy and try to do this type of information on your own, but it's not fully integrated. You have to fully integrate it. You've got to get a project together. You've got to get project managers and engineers and all that sort of stuff to try to be able to pull this data out where it's just included in our service. And that's another good thing to hint on, is that this isn't an additional cost to our service. This is included. This is the standard service that you get all the insights into, and you can now start making really great decisions based on good information, and that information is solid and comes from the end users without even having to go interview them all. So I think probably the next thing here for us to go into, and I think we're running really good on time to be able to handle questions as well, but I want to do a call out. Because in a webinar it's hard to do and hard to answer questions, or at least show the answers to those questions within the webinar. But absolutely contact us if you'd like to go in a deep dive. We'll take you through all of Control Center, not just Dizzion Insights, because Control Center adds all the other components that you'd expect out of a SaaS type portal, right? It includes all the ticketing, all the event windows as far as maintenance when we're patching, our compliance components. If you're in our compliance environments, you'll get a lot of that information there. So everything is within the portal. It's a single pane of glass, whether you're a business person, whether you're a help desk person, whether you're an engineer, all of that is in one place. So again, a great bunch of information. We'd love to have a conversation with you around how it might help you or help your customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Brady. And obviously wanted to be able to do a live walkthrough, have some constraints there whenever you're doing something like this from a demonstration perspective over a webinar, but would be happy to volunteer Rob and Brady myself to do those live demos for people. Sorry, gents, but
no problem.
As you mentioned, we will be gathering up some questions. I've got a few here that have come across already, but as we look to wrap things up, I would urge anyone else who's on and interested in diving a little deeper on a certain topic to put those questions in that control panel on the side. As I'm gathering those up, I wondered, Rob, if you might be able to just give a little bit of insight for our listeners as to what might be the next steps or in the future in terms of continued enhancements to the Dizzion platform and specifically Control Center.
Yeah, absolutely. And Control Center is a culmination of a lot of different technologies. So, what you're seeing here is kind of the tip of the iceberg, if you will. We've empowered a lot of different agents in terms of collecting the data and have built a correlation engine that helps kind of bring these things together so that it's actually meaningful. One of the challenges in a very complex technology stack is, how do you take a message that is, on some storage device somewhere or some compute device somewhere and actually roll that up and correlate that to an experience within a user's desktop session. And that takes a lot of work to pull together. And we're going to continue down that path and bringing the best of breed technology, some of the stuff that we build, some of the stuff that we get off the shelf, and we can kind of fine tune it to work together with our platform. So so really it's getting deeper in some of these analytics and driving more correlation, more trending, and more anomaly detection. That's really the next layer for insights is determining and alerting on what's not normal, right? If you've got 100 users and every day they log in between 8 and 9 o'clock and they log out at lunch and they log back in after lunch and they log off at 6 o'clock, and if you've got a big spike in the middle of the night, what's that doing? Did some user change something? Did something happen? And bringing this anomaly detection to bear is really, I think, our next kind of innovation within the insights, because when things are not working normal, there's typically a reason why, and the business should know that. Just a kind of a story around that. There was one of our customers who has a lot of part-time employees, and they contract out their services and they use our desktops to allow those users access to their data and their network in a secure fashion. And then they've got their full-time pool that kind of follows a normal ebb and flow. But what they saw one night was that at around midnight, there was an influx of about 75 users who just logged in at the same time. And what was that about? That was strange. And it was really, diving down into it, they found that, those part-time users were bidding on the next project and they wanted to get a head start. So they were able to see the user pattern and then be able to incentivize their part-time employees a little bit earlier so that they can actually get a head start on delivering, their solution out to their customers. So it actually allowed them to find an efficiency that people were normally just doing to kind of work the system and actually incentivize that. And so that they can get their projects done much faster. So it's that kind of data is really what we're going after doing and being able to expose that so that you can make business decisions based off of kind of how your users are connecting in. I think the next item is really around taking our portal and adapting it to not just the help desk and administrators, but also the line of business managers, bringing wizards to bear so that they can provision desktops within the rules that are set by the help desk and the engineering group, the IT group, but empowering those business managers to actually provision desktops and go through a wizard. I want I've got this type of user. I want these 5 applications, and click a button, and then the desktop is already assigned. And when that person comes into work, they're immediately able to hit the ground running versus waiting for their PC to be provisioned and so forth and so on, as kind of normal company onboarding opportunities are there.
I think those are some great examples, Rob, that to really bookend some of the key messages today and how it all comes down to end user productivity. It's about driving efficiency, about making an end user's life easier, simpler, and
just more productive.
Yeah. And creating a really exceptional end user experience. I mean, that's employee engagement, that's business efficiency, that's cost savings, that's all of those things that are items that can be impacted rather. So let's dive into a couple questions here. Brady and Rob, if you're still game, because I'm certainly not going to try and answer them. So let's see here. The first one is, we've got someone who's wondering, can you go even deeper and see what specifically a user might be doing inside of Chrome? Brady, you want to take that one?
Sure, absolutely. So not only can you go dive deeper in and find out maybe what URLs they're visiting or how many tabs that they have open, et cetera. The other thing that you can do, and I think I might be answering two questions in here as I look at the list of questions. The other thing that you can do, and you've got the capability to do through the portal, is to remote into that computer. So if they're, if they're not necessarily a technical person and a desktop guru, I guess, so to speak, they may not know how to do a trace route or how to do a ping, even though we can do those straight from the, but there might be something, even sometimes telling them where to click and what screens to open, et cetera, can be daunting over a phone line, right? And so you can actually use the tool to remote into that computer. And so you can take over keyboard and mouse from that end user and actually do the work for them, so to speak, or show them or take a training opportunity to say, hey, here's how you find that piece that I was telling you about, or here's how you close 12 of the 14 Chrome windows running YouTube that you have open.
Brady, I know you're talking to me, and just stop.
Sorry to make it personal there, Kayla. But yeah, there's plenty of different options to figure out exactly what that end user is doing. And again, we'd love to dive into that stuff in a live demo.
And then I think
finally close the Chrome window.
One other thing that you can do as well is take a screenshot. So that help desk manager can immediately click a button and take a screenshot every 5 seconds, if you will, for a minute, and see exactly what that user is doing on those browsers. So it allows you to kind of to go inside and take a snapshot of what is going on with that desktop right at that particular moment, and what's being presented back to that end user, and that screenshot capability will show a lot. One that we've seen when we screenshotted, a person was using sticky notes from Chrome, and they had about 100 different sticky notes all over their desktop with credit card information. That's bad, right? You don't want to do that kind of stuff. So we were able to ascertain that and find that by using that screenshotting technology.
That's awesome. Let's see here. I've got another question. It looks like this person is curious for road warriors, or in other words, users that are on the road and traveling a lot, or maybe working from home. We can't ever really get a clear picture into bandwidth, speed, or quality when they're complaining of slowness. Can Dizzion Insights help me with that? Rob, can you address that one? Yeah,
absolutely. So we have a real-time kind of user dashboard that's in that KPI. And what that's tracking, it's tracking not only CPU memory application utilization on the virtual desktop, but also the protocol latency. So we can measure if that user is on a poor network connection very quickly and actually garner what that latency looks like and alert on it. So within 30 seconds of pulling up that KPI and finding that user, you'll know exactly if this is a problem with the network latency, and then just about how much latency is being impactful to that user session. So absolutely.
We got go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I was just going to tell one of our customer stories in that same regard. They had one of their end users that called in and said, every day at 3:30, my desktop runs really, really slowly and it's performing extremely bad. And so the help desk guy was really good, and he asked the end user, what's happening around that time? What are you doing? Is there any different applications? Is there different work that you're doing at that time, et cetera? And they're like, no, I'm still doing my same stuff that I do during the morning. And the help desk person says, well, what changes? Because they were a work-at-home employee. Well, what changes around your neighborhood or your house or whatever? She says, well, that's just about the time that my son comes home from school. And he said, oh, really? How old's your son? Well, he's 13. What's he do when he comes home from? Well, usually he's waiting for me to get off work, so he jumps on the Xbox and plays Fortnite with all of his friends. Well, their son was taking up all of the bandwidth and hogging the bandwidth from the VDI session, and so very quickly they were able to ascertain that it was a bandwidth issue. There was an increase to the bandwidth that needed to be made, or the son needed to not play Fortnite at the same time that mom was working. So just some of those types of details, and they were able to go back in history and say, yeah, absolutely, every day at 3:30, you know, or around 3:30, you can see the bandwidth and the latency goes up and the bandwidth goes down. And they were able to pinpoint exactly where the problem was very quickly.
Awesome. Do you have a couple additional questions here, Rob and Brady, if we've got just another minute or two? This one is asking, can you identify what URLs users are visiting when on the Chrome browser? I think we addressed that one, and the answer is yes, right? Okay. We've also, we've got someone asking, can you set it up so that there are notifications provided based on certain thresholds that you might establish so that you can be proactive with the desktop users rather than waiting for an issue to crop up or getting those tickets and calls coming in? Can you address that, Brady?
Sure, absolutely. And Rob alluded to it a little bit prior as well. And in the system, we've actually used 4 different colors. So there's a green, there's a yellow, there's an orange, and there's a red. And so when you see that yellow, that's that preliminary indicator of there could be a problem that arises. And what's really great too is you'll see those yellows or those oranges, you'll see them come and go because it is real-time information. So if somebody opens a new application, for instance, and it spikes their CPU, you'll see that go yellow and then you'll see it go back to green. So you'll see those real-time things. But when you see that yellow, for instance, you can drill down real quick and see what they've done and how long that's been in that yellow state. And if it's just for a moment, it might be a couple seconds even that it's in the yellow state and it'll clear again, because every computer does that, right? You launch a new application, it uses your processor to load the application into memory, and so you'll get a spike in CPU. And so the good part is that it's giving you preliminary data, but it's giving you really good preliminary data on what they're doing, so you're not making a knee-jerk reaction, so to speak, based on something alarming for a couple of seconds. It's not just a red or a green. It gives you that yellow, that orange before you get to a red state, so you can jump in there and see what's going on.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. All right, no more questions at this point, so we'll wrap things up. First of all, Rob, Brady, really want to thank both of you. Great job today, really comprehensive, I think, overview of not only the control center, but some of the really new and differentiated features that we're bringing to market, and super excited about those. Obviously, again, we want to reiterate to our attendees today that we're more than happy to set up a customized or one-to-one live look or live run-through or demo for you or your teams if that's something you're interested in. Obviously, some limitations in a webinar environment, but happy to set that up. So please do reach out to us if it's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, and even if it's not necessarily insights, but you might want to talk about our compliance services around PCI and HIPAA, or the application streaming stuff that we're doing.
Secure endpoints,
yeah, secure endpoints, all those types of things. We'd be more than happy to talk.
Absolutely. And as a final reminder, just want to let everyone know you will be receiving a copy of today's slides if you registered for the webinar. Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it on behalf of the entire Dizzion team, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
Thanks so much.